Hello, I'm Clinton Bowman, level designer. I'm going to present some of my portfolio with a bit of commentary as I go through it. This is Tron Evolution, which I worked at Propaganda Games Disney. I started with level layouts, 2D level layouts, creating gray blocks, and then from there I did a lot of kit bashing with these assets, scripting various scripted events like that bridge and all this infection spreading, like the doors and explosions. That was with Matinee. Also, the initial layout of this light cycle racing section, placing then in the 3D blockout, setting up the scripted events of debris, things falling down, AI, other racers. This is King Kong, or Peter Jackson's King Kong. I did a lot of prototyping with those fire lances on those natives. A lot of the gameplay from swinging, like prototyping gyms. This section of the village, this little brief section here, and this room where I had to rescue Anne. And then finally at the end of this section here, worked on this little bit at the end. And this is Frontlines Fuel of War, PvP game, 32-player multiplayer. This is the map Solar Farm that was ranked #1. Actually, sorry, that's Hindsight. This one's Solar Farm. That is ranked #1, and Hindsight's ranked #2 on Xbox.com. And with that, I set up the layouts, the gray blocks, static mesh after, setting up the spawns, the objectives, and making sure it was well balanced, a lot of iteration, and play through that way. I don't know why it's skipping. It seemed like my video skipped. Okay, this is another level I worked on. Living Quarters. That's a cinematic. I didn't really work on the cinematic. However, I did work on the single player aspect of this part here. I don't know why. Pause this. Continue on to Nefarious Dimensions ARM project that initially started as a third-person capstone project at Sheridan College. For level design, I did the layouts, a lot of the writing, for this interior spot of the ship, and this is like a jail complex where the player's trapped and has to like make friends and craft with the other cellmates to try to find a ways of escaping, all while every day it's like Groundhog Day. The player gets out inside this space mining mech where they have to mine asteroids in the galaxy. That's all procedurally generated, basically empty space, and then procedurally generate asteroids, various degrees, and other space debris, spawning different types of AI and various other things throughout the universe as the player scans and collects minerals and refines it and sells it and does pay or gets further upgrades before paying off their debt and being released from the prison, which is one of the ways to escape. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff we had in the game, but we were planning to launch post episode 1, but never got that far. So this is just showing some other parts of the levels. There's a few other spacecraft that I helped design. The one had an interior was the one the players trapped on. The other ones were exterior. And we had interiors of the space mining mechs. And at the time, we were trying to really push the envelope of being a simulator inside a VR game, because originally, I'll show the prototype from the capstone was actually third person, which we'll show in the next video. Yeah. So that was the current version. on Steam. And as I mentioned, this was the original capstone. Was myself and two. It was myself and two other programmers that made this in a matter of a couple months, and I helped do the design, and then I worked on the layouts of the space station. We only had pretty much this one level, then a lot of like space outside of this um, space station and mining refining complex. So this is completely different than the version that's on Steam right now. But it's just another example of some of my level design during that time and the procedural generation we were using. Okay, so this is Watchdogs Legion. So here I set up the player leaning up against the wall. It was setting up the tagging system and the animation so it all work, and then once the player spawned in for the start point, the player was able to walk through this demo section. I had placed, there's a person in the corner there, like even these people scrubbing the graffiti off, the homeless people walking on the spline were generated through splines and Houdini, so I didn't really work on that. They're more procedure generated, so not hand placed. But I did place the guard there, here to get these women here drinking the coffee, and the man, woman here, just all these people to making it feel like a living world. So yeah, these guards, they have a little extra setup on them so that they can actually have AI that will do their policing behaviors. And these characters had different tags. As you can see, they have different stats. And yeah, interviewer, so there's a camera here, a drone. Placement of these characters for this E3 demo that had something like over 65 award and nominations. Yeah, setting up this character here. So you'd scan. I worked on an earlier version of the layout of this Piccadilly Circus area. Gray blocking and setting up the roads and pacing things out, but it has got a bit smaller since the final, with the final version. And then Art made their art pass. There, yeah. There's some other parts that I did gray blocks, the exterior maps and writing documentation for some of the earlier missions. Fast forward a bit. This section here, where the protest is taking place, setting up barriers, addressing this area, placing. There was more protesters there earlier, but now that combat has broken out, they panicked, they ran away. Setting up some characters in and around, like the guy on the phone, a hot dog vendor, like a guy at the newsstand. A lot of these background NPC players, but they're actually playable characters because you can up-res them, hack into them, and recruit them on your team, which is a really cool play as anyone feature that I worked on. I worked closely with the animation director and the AI systems team in order to get these features up and running. So yeah, a lot of the player character or NPCs placed in this area. I didn't work on this section here, so I'll just pause it. Okay. Yeah, here is another section that I worked on. Setting up the player character starts here against the wall, so they'd start this animation regardless of which character you are. They'd always start in that position, depending if it's male or female. The different animation would play. Here I set up like people cleaning or sitting over in the background playing card games. Um, this guard, and then inside past this area is like part of the level, the interior. I'll switch over to Mechwarrior 5, the Kestral Lancers. Um, so these missions were all done in Unreal 4. They were done through various permutations of procedural generated levels and then hand tweaking them for setting up the AI, spawning, moving around objectives, tweaking, and a lot of, as you can see on the mini map there, there's a tile-based system, so the player is approximately inside one tile, and that would be an art-specific tile that I originally worked on setting up the buildings. So I build these tiles, like all those buildings there. I had the art pieces that I would replace the gray blocks that I had in there originally, and they're destructible buildings. As you can see, the player is moving towards this objective, which is another walking into the second tile, which has a very large base facility there with walls, and I added a lot of turrets in and around the base as well to make the objective more difficult. And spawning different waves, having different triggers and scripting of these events, set dressing and fixing various bugs as they came in. Yeah, there's a few, oh yeah, you can take out these generators, and there's a few levels in this game that I worked on. I could show another one. Here is another level that I was working on with the crash ship. Same tile-based system, but in the background there's a very large ship that I placed in there that was crashed. Art made the actual ship crash, but it was my positioning and laying it out at the center and breaking it up in the way it is, and then having the biome set in the lead up into the mission, spawning all the enemies in here and setting up the objectives. So yeah, I could just fast forward. There's a bit problem with this. One of the issues with this game is it's very slow in terms of like a mech walking, and there's some down beats that we were trying to get a lot more narrative at the time, but it was very tricky with the procedural generated system. Even just doing basic changes, sometimes it meant regenerating entire tiles, which was kind of made things a lot more difficult than more traditional level design, where you could just go in and tweak stuff and not have a knock-on effect of potentially other levels. So yeah, we have a little bit of a battle inside the crash ship here, and near the end we just get through the backside of the ship where a larger battle ensues with the boss battle. It goes on for about 30, almost 40 minutes. It's a bit of a long battle there. I'll move on to the next game. Army of Two, the Devil's Cartel. For this game, I worked on layouts, like 2D layouts, gray block, which was relatively quick, and then we had a lot of art assets ready to go, so it was placing a lot of like these cover objects that were destructible, setting up setting up objectives, and also a lot of these destructibles like the buildings and that were set up here. So I worked on this just the beginning section here of the hacienda. There's a couple spots and a few levels in the single player that I worked on. Lots has been changed in the final version as well, but the original at least layout and some placement of things have been shifted around a bit. or move. I could show some other sections. This part in the sniper barriers section. So not that part there, but in here, setting up the street with different AI coming along, where you have to protect Cordova and Bradley, um, placement of cover, the layout, like exploding gas canisters. So that was set up for this area. There's also this section outside the mine. Same thing, original layout, placing of the mesh. This was done in Frostbite engine. At the time was really impressive for the different engines that were available. There was some AI that was stripped out as well. We had to kind of rebuild. Well, not me personally, but the team was rebuilding AI from scratch. So there was a bit of time where we didn't really have the proper AI that was being used from Battlefield. So yeah, placing a lot of these meshes here, spawning the AI, pickups, items, adding the narrative bits. And it's pretty much this little section here, and then there's another room in up ahead. Just go right through there. I worked on these contact bonus missions called Overkillers. So what these were essentially recycled maps. Like I worked on this part of a map in the single player. So we reused certain spots of certain maps, and then it was just a crazy chaotic storm of enemies. Different mobs would come at the player, and now the player has the overkill ability and perk that, as you can see, just being invincible and just ripping through with explosive near unlimited rounds. So it's more of like a satisfying reward to the player to just kind of run through and chaotically cause damage. So yeah, this is outside the mine, as I showed in the one of the previous levels. So there's a few levels of that I also worked on. Speaking of reiterating older maps or other maps, from essentially this is the opposite. It's a multiplayer map called MP Street that was remade into SP Street in Frontline Fuel of War, and so this one, it's PvE. This is a bit outdated these days, but it was kind of new at the time. So this was an MP map that I would then heavily modify to work for single player. Just gonna kind of jump ahead a bit. There was this map, SP Street, and then SP Village. They were for the DLC. I also worked on a bunch of single player maps, N7 and a bit of N3. I could show more about that, but there's also the multiplayer maps that I mentioned earlier. Solar Farm and Hindsight are the multiplayer maps I worked on. I also worked on Homefront in the pre-production stage, which is the successor to Frontlines. Well, it's actually a completely different game, but same sort of premise. There's also a few other games I worked on, um, kind of jumping around which ones I missed out, but there was open season at Ubisoft. I could show more of that. It was the final boss battle, some of the early prototyping layouts for the earlier missions, like even Boog's Garage. And then I worked on the mini games as well, setting up and balancing those. Other than that, there's some other projects I can't really discuss due to NDA. I could show some. It's a mobile game. It's Wasteland Heroes. I was art director on that. Um, there's some other smaller project. I could show Lamper, I guess. This game actually gives me bad memories from prototyping this game. It was so fast earlier on with the VR, gave me such crazy headaches. But um, I'd work on. It is a bit of procedural levels in here. It's basically chunks of levels that I would set up with the trees and those chomping piranhas, like these power ups I place, and then what I would do, at being like an infinite runner, we'd have a mode where it would spawn in different equations of these levels spawning in a sequential matter or in a certain way. But then we also had like the ones specifically designed to play in a certain order. So there's just an example, and you get power ups, and in VR it could play. Well, it gave me a headache after a while, but it's been slowed down quite a lot from the earlier version, which is a good thing. This was a level design test I did for Star Citizen, like a gray block, basic, quick, trying to nail the scale and the shape of the level, setting up placeholder objectives just to try to get an overall sense of what the level could be. I've done a lot of different gray blocks. I have a lot of other examples I could provide as well. Um, as you can see, I'm still working on my portfolio. I still have the game uh, Mechwarrior 5 Clans I just worked on. I haven't actually played through the missions that I worked on just yet, but I do intend on recording some type of commentary for that as well. Um, Here's just some simple callouts showing out like a step and a crouch, guard, as this was like a timed test where I had to quickly create a layout in a certain amount of time. Um, so yeah, pretty much there's a lot more I could show, even like through my art, if there was modeling of characters or examples of rigging, animation, making of textures and substance. I've done a lot of different things, but yeah, my true passion is setting up gameplay through layouts, gray blocking, and then polishing from that to the end final game through a lot of iteration feedback through the team. Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much what I have right now to show. But if there's anything more you'd like to see or explain in more detail, I'd be happy to do so. And hopefully this was somewhat informative. Sorry if it's not completely polished or pretty much hacked together, but hopefully it's somewhat can demonstrate a bit of my skills. Thank you.